Robert Bob Mitchell, a 68-year-old retired Army sergeant from Dayton, Ohio, had served 2 tours of duty in Vietnam between 1972 and 1975, before returning to civilian life and building a career as a machinist at General Motors. His military service had earned him several commendations, including a Bronze Star for valor during combat operations near Da Nang, though he rarely discussed his wartime experiences with family or friends. Following his retirement from GM in 2018 after 38 years of service, Mitchell had struggled with the transition to civilian retirement despite his substantial pension and veteran benefits. His first wife of 42 years, Margaret, had passed away from cancer in 2021, leaving Mitchell isolated and struggling with depression that he refused to address through professional counseling or medical intervention. Mitchell's adult children, Robert Jr. and Susan, lived in different states and maintained limited contact with their father, whom they described as emotionally distant and increasingly difficult to communicate with since their mother's death. Both children had encouraged Mitchell to seek grief counseling or consider relocating to be closer to family, but he had rejected these suggestions while insisting he was managing well independently. The catalyst for the events that followed came in September 23 when Mitchell met Carol Henderson, a 61-year-old widow, through a church social group at St. Matthew's Lutheran Church in Kettering. Carol had relocated to Ohio from Florida following her husband's death from a heart attack 2 years earlier, seeking a fresh start closer to her sister's family. Carol worked part-time as a receptionist at a medical clinic and lived in a 1-bedroom apartment near the church where she had become active in various community service programs. Her gentle personality and shared experience of recent spousal loss created an immediate connection with Mitchell, who found her presence comforting and her attention flattering. Their relationship progressed rapidly, with Mitchell and Carol spending increasing amounts of time together, attending church services, sharing meals, and taking day trips throughout southwestern Ohio. Carol's friends later described her as happier than she had been since her husband's death, expressing excitement about having found companionship and potential love again. However, according to evidence that emerged during subsequent investigation, Mitchell's behavior in the relationship contained warning signs that Carol either didn't recognize or chose to overlook. He displayed possessive tendencies, questioning Carol about her interactions with other church members and expressing jealousy when she spent time with female friends or her sister's family. Mitchell also demonstrated controlling behavior regarding their social activities, insisting on making all decisions about where they went and what they did together. Carol's sister, Linda Patterson, later told investigators that Carol had mentioned feeling like she needed to ask Mitchell's permission for routine activities, though she had attributed this to his military background rather than recognizing it as potentially problematic behavior. By March 24, Mitchell had proposed marriage to Carol during a dinner at their favorite restaurant in Dayton. Carol accepted enthusiastically, viewing the proposal as confirmation that she had successfully rebuilt her life after the devastation of losing her first husband. The engagement was celebrated by their church community, where both were well regarded for their volunteer work and apparent devotion to each other. The wedding took place on May 18, 24, at St. Matthew's Lutheran Church in a ceremony attended by approximately 60 guests, including Carol's sister and Mitchell's adult children. The reception was held at a nearby community center, with decorations and catering arranged primarily by Carol and her female friends from church. However, tensions emerged during the wedding reception when Mitchell became visibly agitated by the attention Carol received from male guests offering congratulations and best wishes. Several witnesses later reported that Mitchell appeared uncomfortable with normal social interactions and seemed to view friendly conversations between Carol and other men as inappropriate flirtation. The honeymoon trip to Hawaii had been Carol's suggestion, representing her desire to visit the islands she had dreamed about for years but had never been able to afford with her first husband. Mitchell had initially resisted the expense, but eventually agreed when Carol offered to contribute her savings toward the cost of the trip. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. They departed for Honolulu on May 20th, 24, staying at the Outrigger Reef Waikiki Beach Resort for what was planned as a 7-day honeymoon vacation. The resort, located directly on Waikiki Beach, provided the tropical paradise setting that Carol had envisioned for their romantic getaway. The first 3 days of the trip proceeded normally, with the couple participating in typical tourist activities, including visits to Pearl Harbor, Diamond Head Crater, and various beaches and shopping areas. Photos recovered from Carol's camera showed both newlyweds appearing relaxed and happy during these initial days of their honeymoon. However, Mitchell's behavior began deteriorating on May 23rd when Carol struck up conversations with other tourists at the hotel pool and beach areas. Her friendly, outgoing personalities naturally led to interactions with fellow vacationers, including couples from the mainland and international visitors who were eager to share travel experiences and recommendations. Mitchell interpreted Carol's social behavior as disrespectful to their new marriage and began making increasingly hostile comments about her interactions with strangers. He accused her of flirting with other men and suggested that her behavior was embarrassing to him and inappropriate for a newly married woman. Carol's attempts to reassure Mitchell that her conversations were innocent and typical vacation, socializing only seemed to intensify his anger. Hotel staff later reported observing heated arguments between the couple in the lobby and restaurant areas, with Mitchell appearing agitated and Carol seeming confused and distressed by his accusations. The situation escalated on the evening of May 24th, when Carol participated in a group dinner conversation with several couples they had met at the resort. The discussion centered on travel experiences and retirement plans, topics that Carol found engaging and enjoyable after months of social isolation following her first husband's death. Mitchell's reaction to Carol's animated participation in the dinner conversation was immediate and intense. He accused her of making him look foolish, claimed she was seeking attention from other men, and insisted they return to their room immediately, despite Carol's protests that she was simply being friendly. The argument continued in their hotel room, where Mitchell's accusations became more specific and his language more threatening. He claimed that Carol's behavior proved she wasn't ready for marriage and suggested that she was using their honeymoon as an opportunity to meet other men. Carol's defense of her innocent interactions apparently triggered something in Mitchell related to his unresolved psychological issues from military service and his unprocessed grief over his first wife's death. Hotel security footage later showed that the couple did not leave their room after returning from dinner on May 24th. The fatal assault occurred during the early morning hours of May 25th, 24, when Mitchell's rage over Carol's perceived disrespect reached a breaking point. According to evidence later presented at trial, Mitchell attacked Carol with his fists and possibly other objects in their hotel room, inflicting massive trauma to her head and upper body. The medical examiner later determined that Carol sustained multiple skull fractures, brain hemorrhaging, and defensive wounds on her arms and hands, indicating that she had attempted to protect herself during the prolonged assault. The severity of her injuries suggested that the attack had continued well after she was no longer capable of resistance. Mitchell's military training and hand-to-hand combat techniques had made him capable of inflicting lethal damage with his bare hands, though forensic evidence also suggested he had used a heavy object, possibly a lamp or bathroom fixture, during portions of the attack. Following Carol's death, Mitchell attempted to stage the scene to suggest that she had suffered an accidental fall in the bathroom. He moved her body to the bathtub area and attempted to create evidence consistent with a slip-and-fall accident that might have occurred while Carol was showering or preparing for bed. However, Mitchell's staging efforts were unsuccessful due to the extensive nature of Carol's injuries and the blood evidence throughout the hotel room that contradicted his suggested scenario. The amount and distribution of blood indicated a violent struggle rather than a single accidental fall. Hotel housekeeping staff discovered Carol's body on the morning of May 26th when Mitchell called the front desk, claiming that his wife was unresponsive in their bathroom and requesting immediate medical assistance. Emergency medical technicians pronounced Carol dead at the scene, after determining that her injuries were inconsistent with the accidental fall scenario Mitchell had described. Honolulu Police Department detectives were immediately called to investigate due to the suspicious nature of Carol's injuries and the inconsistencies in Mitchell's account of events. Detective James Nakamura noted that the blood spatter patterns and the extent of trauma were clearly inconsistent with an accidental bathroom fall. The investigation revealed Mitchell's history of controlling behavior toward Carol, as documented through phone records showing frequent calls between Carol and her sister discussing Mitchell's possessiveness and jealousy. Hotel staff also provided statements about the couple's public arguments and Mitchell's obvious anger about Carol's social interactions. Medical examination confirmed that Carol's injuries had been inflicted by multiple impacts from both fist and blunt objects, ruling out any possibility of accidental death. The defensive wounds on her hands and arms proved that she had been conscious and attempting to protect herself during much of the assault. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more shocking true crime stories. Let us know in the comments what you think drove Mitchell to such extreme violence on what should have been the happiest time of their marriage. Mitchell was arrested on May 27, 2024, and charged with second-degree murder in connection with Carol's death. His initial statements to investigators continued to claim that Carol had fallen accidentally, but the overwhelming physical evidence made this defense impossible to maintain. During interrogation, Mitchell's responses revealed the depth of his psychological problems, including untreated PTSD from his military service and unresolved grief issues related to his first wife's death. However, these mental health factors were viewed as explanatory rather than exculpatory regarding his criminal responsibility. The case attracted significant attention in both Ohio and Hawaii due to the tragic circumstances of a honeymoon murder and the involvement of a military veteran whose service record had previously been exemplary. Veterans advocacy groups expressed concern that Mitchell's case might reinforce negative stereotypes about combat veterans while emphasizing the importance of mental health treatment. Mitchell's adult children expressed shock and horror at their father's actions, acknowledging that they had noticed changes in his personality since their mother's death, but had never imagined he was capable of violence. They cooperated with the investigation while also expressing sympathy for Carol's family. Carol Henderson's sister, Linda Patterson, became the primary spokesperson for the family, describing Carol as a kind and trusting woman who had been looking forward to starting a new chapter of her life with Mitchell. She emphasized that Carol had never mentioned feeling physically threatened, only controlled and sometimes confused by Mitchell's possessive behavior. The preliminary court proceedings in Hawaii revealed additional evidence about Mitchell's deteriorating mental state in the months leading up to the murder, including his increasing isolation, alcohol use, and expressions of anger about changes in society and relationships that he didn't understand or accept. Mental health experts testified about the potential connections between Mitchell's untreated PTSD, his grief over losing his first wife, and his violent reaction to perceiving threats to his new marriage. However, they also emphasized that these factors did not excuse or justify his decision to kill Carol. Mitchell's defense strategy initially focused on arguing for reduced charges based on his mental health issues and military service record. However, the premeditated nature of his staging efforts after the murder undermined claims about diminished capacity or temporary insanity. The prosecution presented evidence that Mitchell's violence was the culmination of a pattern of controlling and possessive behavior that had escalated throughout his relationship with Carol. They argued that his military training had made him more dangerous when his psychological problems reached a breaking point. Expert witnesses testified about the dynamics of domestic violence in relationships involving older adults, noting that age does not provide protection from intimate partner violence, and that controlling behavior often escalates when abusers feel their authority is being challenged. The jury deliberated for 12 hours before returning a guilty verdict on charges of second-degree murder. Mitchell was sentenced to life imprisonment with possibility of parole after 25 years, taking into account his age, military service, and lack of previous criminal history. Carol Henderson Mitchell was buried in Florida near her first husband, in accordance with wishes expressed in her will. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of friends from both Ohio and Florida who remembered her as generous and optimistic despite the challenges she had faced in life. The Outrigger Reef Waikiki Beach Resort implemented enhanced training for staff members to recognize signs of domestic violence and provide resources for guests who might be experiencing relationship abuse during their stays. Mitchell's military benefits were not affected by his criminal conviction, but his veteran status became a subject of debate regarding how military service might contribute to domestic violence risk factors when combined with untreated mental health issues. Robert Mitchell is currently serving his sentence at Halawa Correctional Facility in Hawaii. He has participated in mental health treatment programs and has expressed remorse for his actions, though he continues to struggle with accepting full responsibility for Carol's death. The case prompted discussions about the importance of recognizing warning signs in relationships involving older adults and the need for domestic violence resources targeted towards seniors who may be entering new relationships after the loss of longtime spouses. Veterans organizations used Mitchell's case to advocate for improved mental health services and mandatory counseling for combat veterans experiencing relationship difficulties, emphasizing that seeking help is a sign of strength rather than weakness. The Honeymoon murder highlighted the reality that domestic violence can emerge in relationships at any age, and that the combination of untreated trauma, grief, and controlling personality traits can create deadly situations even in seemingly stable marriages between mature adults.